Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a close look at pulmonary rehab and how technology is changing the game, especially for those dealing with COPD. And to help us navigate this exciting world, we've got a leading researcher in the field. Now, what I find so fascinating about this deep dive is that we're going beyond the usual talk about exercise and inhalers. Our guest is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in respiratory care.
It really is a whole new way of thinking about COPD.
Right. And to guide us through this new frontier, we have with us a researcher who's at the forefront of this field. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
You know, I think a lot of people, when they hear pulmonary rehab, they immediately think of, like exercise and inhalers.
Yeah, the traditional stuff.
The traditional stuff. But you're really challenging that, right? You're looking at things from a whole new perspective.
That's right. And a lot of this groundbreaking work is coming from Dr. Wondershare at Taipei Medical University. He's using technology in ways we haven't seen before, from AI to smart toilets.
Smart toilets. Okay, now I have to hear more about that. But before we get to that, let's start with something I think we can all relate to. That annoying cough that just won't quit.
Uh-huh.
Most of us, I think, just automatically assume it's a lung problem, right?
Yeah, I think that's a natural assumption. But Dr. Liu points out that coughing can actually be a symptom of a whole bunch of different things.
Oh, really?
Things you might not expect.
Like what?
Well, for instance, you could have something called bronchiectasis.
Bronchiectasis.
Yeah, where your airways are damaged and widened and lead to a buildup of mucus. Or it could be pneumonia, sinusitis, even something completely unrelated to your lungs.
Oh, wow. So it's not always as straightforward as we might think.
Definitely not. And that's why getting the right diagnosis is so important.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a medical mystery to solve here.
Sometimes.
And is that where AI comes in?
That's exactly where Dr. Liu sees AI playing a huge role. He believes AI can help us solve these diagnostic puzzles.
That's amazing.
Imagine a system where you go to the doctor, they input your symptoms, your medical history, even your lifestyle into this system.
Right.
And the AI analyzes all of that data to create a personalized treatment plan just for you.
Wow, so it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach anymore.
Not at all.
It's tailored to your individual needs.
Exactly.
That's incredible. It's like having your own personal Dr. Liu on call 24/7. Speaking of virtual assistants, Dr. Liu also recommends this really interesting tool called Google's Notebook LM. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it's like a medical GPT.
A medical GPT. What does that even mean?
It's pretty amazing, actually. You can feed Notebook LM all sorts of information, research papers, medical guidelines, even YouTube videos, and it can analyze all of that and answer your questions in a way that's easy to understand.
So it's like having access to a vast medical library, and it can explain things to you in plain English.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that it can adapt its communication style to different audiences. So whether you're a medical professional or just someone trying to understand your own health better, Notebook LM can make the information accessible to you.
Wow, that's so powerful, especially for people who are trying to navigate the often confusing world of medical information. It's so easy to get overwhelmed by all the technical jargon and research papers.
It really is.
But this sounds like it could really make a difference. So let's talk a little bit about pulmonary rehab specifically. Now, I know exercise is a key component.
Absolutely.
But Dr. Liu seems to be advocating for a more holistic approach. Is that right?
That's right. He believes that while exercise is crucial, there are other factors that we need to address first.
Okay. Like what?
Well, for example, airway clearance is really important. This means making sure your airways are clear of mucus and obstructions so you can breathe easier.
That makes sense.
He also talks a lot about learning proper breathing techniques.
Right, because a lot of people with COPD, they don't even realize they're not breathing efficiently.
Exactly. And he uses this great example of brushing your teeth.
Brushing your teeth.
Yeah, something we all do every day. But for someone with COPD, it can be surprisingly tiring if they're not using the right breathing techniques.
Oh, wow.
He even recommends sitting down and leaning on the sink for support while brushing.
Really?
It's all about conserving energy and making those everyday tasks easier.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of your body and what it needs.
I'm curious, how do you actually track progress with something like that, especially outside of a clinical setting?
You know what? Dr. Liu is a big believer in using simple technology to monitor progress.
Like what?
Well, one of the most effective tools he recommends is something you probably already have in your pocket, a pedometer.
A pedometer. You're kidding, right?
Nope, I'm serious.
Something that basic can make a difference for people with COPD.
You'd be surprised. Research shows that simply tracking your daily steps can be incredibly motivating.
Interesting.
You see, even a small increase in activity can have a big impact on their quality of life and overall health.
I never would have thought of that. But I'm starting to see a pattern here. Dr. Liu seems to be all about finding those simple, practical ways to use technology to improve people's lives.
He is, and he's doing some really fascinating work with surface electromyography, or M.
M.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty complicated.
It's actually not as complex as it sounds.
Can you break it down for me?
Sure, imagine you have these small sensors on your skin, kind of like stickers, and these sensors can pick up the electrical signals that your muscles produce when they contract.
Oh, okay.
And by analyzing those signals, we can see which muscles you're using and how effectively you're using them.
So by understanding how people are using their muscles, Dr. Liu can then identify areas where they might be wasting energy
Exactly.
and come up with more personalized interventions.
That's right.
That's so fascinating. Okay, now I have to ask you about the smart toilet.
All right, the smart toilet.
This is the one I've been waiting for.
This is a great example of how Dr. Liu thinks outside the box.
So tell me, how does it work?
Well, this toilet has sensors in it that measure your leg muscle strength as you stand up.
Okay, but why a toilet?
Because for people with COPD, leg muscle strength is actually a key indicator of their overall health and mobility.
Oh, interesting. So he's basically turning an everyday activity into a health assessment.
You got it.
That's brilliant. You know, we've been talking a lot about the physical aspects of COPD, but Dr. Liu also highlights something that I think often gets overlooked: the link between mental health and respiratory illness.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about that.
He's found a very strong connection between anxiety and depression and the frequency and severity of COPD flare-ups.
Flare-ups, those are the periods when your symptoms suddenly get worse, right?
Exactly.
So you're saying that someone's mental state can actually impact their physical symptoms.
It's a two-way street. Anxiety and depression can trigger those flare-ups, and those flare-ups can, in turn, worsen mental health.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It can be, and that's why it's so important to manage both your mental and physical health when you're dealing with COPD.
Absolutely. But how do you even measure something like anxiety or depression in relation to COPD? Is it just through self-reporting? Or are there more objective ways to assess it?
That's a great question, and actually leads us to some of Dr. Liu's most fascinating research. He's been looking at something called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA.
RSA.
Yeah, it might sound complicated, but it's really a simple and interesting concept. Think about it this way. Your breath and your heart are constantly talking to each other.
Okay, my breath and my heart are talking to each other. How so?
Well, when you're relaxed and you take a deep breath in, your heart rate actually speeds up a little. And when you breathe out, your heart rate slows down. It's a natural rhythm, a sort of a dance between your breath and your heart. And it's a sign of good RSA. But when you're stressed or anxious, your breathing becomes shallow and irregular. And that disrupts this natural rhythm.
Oh, interesting. So if my breathing is all over the place, my heart rate will be too, and that could be a sign of anxiety.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is that Dr. Liu is finding ways to measure this RSA using technology.
Really?
He's experimenting with things like fiber optic sensors that can detect those subtle changes in your breathing patterns.
Fiber optic sensors. That sounds pretty high tech.
It is.
Are there any simpler ways to monitor this RSA?
Believe it or not, Dr. Liu is even exploring the possibility of using smartphone
Cameras?
to monitor breathing patterns and heart rate.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that my phone could potentially detect my anxiety just by looking at my breathing?
It's still early days, but the potential is there by analyzing those subtle changes in your breathing and heart rate, which, by the way, can be picked up by your phone's camera. It might be possible to get insights into your emotional state.
That's amazing. Dr. Liu really is on the cutting edge of this research. You know, you mentioned earlier his work with smart wards, this idea of really integrating technology into the hospital environment. Can you paint a picture for us of what that would look like?
Imagine a hospital room that's designed to not just treat your illness, but to actually promote your well-being. Sensors are embedded throughout the room, constantly monitoring your vital signs, your breathing patterns, even the quality of your sleep. All this data is then fed into a central system that uses AI to analyze it in real time.
It sounds like having an invisible team of experts constantly watching over you, making sure you're okay.
That's a great way to put it. The AI acts as an early warning system, alerting the medical team if anything seems amiss. And it's not just about reacting to problems. The system can also proactively adjust your treatment plan based on the incoming data.
So, for example, if the system detects that your breathing is becoming labored, it could maybe automatically adjust your oxygen flow or alert a nurse to come check on you.
Exactly. The goal is to create this really responsive care environment, one that anticipates your needs and provides personalized support. And because the AI is handling all of the data analysis, doctors and nurses have more time and energy to focus on what they do best, providing that compassionate, human-centered care.
I love that vision. It's really exciting to think that this could become a reality someday. But I have to ask, wouldn't a system like this be incredibly expensive. How accessible would it be to the average person?
It's a valid concern, but Dr. Liu believes that as technology continues to advance, the costs will come down, making these kinds of innovations more widely available. And he also stresses that we don't need to wait for these high-tech smart wards to start benefiting from technology. We can make changes in our own lives today, even with simple tools.
So we don't have to build a smart ward in our homes to start taking control of our health.
Exactly. Remember that pedometer we talked about earlier?
Right.
Something as basic as that can make a real difference. It's about taking those small steps towards a more tech-enabled approach to health.
I'm starting to get it. It's not about waiting for some futuristic solution. It's about finding ways to incorporate technology into our lives now in a way that supports our well-being.
That's it. It could be using a meditation app to manage stress or a fitness tracker to monitor your activity levels. The tools are out there and they're becoming more accessible all the time.
It's about finding what works best for you and using technology as a partner in your health journey. Dr. Your work is really inspiring.
It is.
But I'm curious, with all this talk about AI and sensors, it's easy to imagine a future where healthcare becomes very cold and impersonal. What are Dr. Liu's thoughts on that?
It's an important point, and it's something that Dr. Liu is very mindful of. He doesn't want to see a future where doctors and nurses are replaced by robots. In fact, he believes that technology can actually enhance that human connection in healthcare.
Enhance the human connection. How so?
Think about it. If AI is handling those routine tasks, like monitoring vital signs, analyzing lab results, flagging any potential problems, then doctors and nurses have more time and mental energy to spend with their patients, really listening to their concerns, answering their questions, providing that emotional support that is so crucial to healing.
So it's not about replacing human interaction. It's about creating space for more meaningful interactions between patients and providers.
Exactly. It's about using technology to foster empathy, understanding, and trust.
I love that idea. So technology can help us reclaim that human side of healthcare.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's not just limited to that doctor-patient relationship. Technology can help us connect with our own bodies in a more meaningful way.
How so?
Well, we're constantly sending out signals, and technology can help us listen to those signals, understand what our bodies are trying to tell us.
That's a really good point. It's about becoming more attuned to our own bodies and using technology as a tool to support our well-being, not something that dictates it.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between technology and intuition, between data and self-awareness.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. It's really inspiring to see how technology can be used not only to treat illness, but to empower us to live healthier and more fulfilling lives.
It's just the beginning. I think we're on the cusp of a real revolution in healthcare, and Dr. Liu is certainly one of the pioneers leading the charge.
It is an exciting time to be alive, that's for sure. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, I want to bring it back to our listeners for a moment. If they could take away just one message from this deep dive, what would you want it to be?
I think the most important message is that we all have more power over our health than we realize, and technology can be an incredibly powerful ally in that journey.
Yeah, it's really incredible to think about all the possibilities. And, I think a lot of people worry about the cost of all this technology.
Right?
But as you said, the costs are coming down. And even now, there are a lot of affordable options out there.
Exactly, and you don't need to break the bank to start incorporating technology into your health journey.
It's about finding what works best for you and your budget.
That's it. There's so many great tools out there. Even simple things like a pedometer can make a big difference.
It all comes back to taking those small steps and being proactive about our health.
Absolutely.
But, with all this talk about technology, I think it's important to remember that it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It's not going to solve all of our health problems overnight.
It's a tool, just like any other tool.
It's how we use it that matters.
Exactly. We have to use it wisely.
And remember that it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Couldn't agree more.
So it's not about replacing doctors and nurses with robots or relying solely on algorithms to make decisions about our health.
No, not at all.
It's about finding that balance between technology and human expertise, between data and intuition.
And at the end of the day, healthcare is about people, not just data points.
That's so true. And it brings us back to something you mentioned earlier about technology actually enhancing the human connection in healthcare. I'm really fascinated by that idea. How does Dr. Liu see that playing out?
Well, he talks about technology freeing up doctors and nurses to spend more time with their patients, really listening to their concerns, answering their questions,
Right.
providing that emotional support that's so important.
Because if the AI is handling all the routine tasks,
Like monitoring vital signs and analyzing lab results.
then the healthcare providers can really focus on that human connection.
Exactly. They can be more present with their patients.
It's about creating a more human-centered healthcare experience
Exactly.
where technology supports those human connections. It doesn't replace them.
That's it. It's about using technology to foster empathy, understanding, and trust.
I love that. So technology can help us reclaim the human side of healthcare.
I think so.
This whole deep dive into Dr. Lu's work has been truly eye-opening. It's given me a whole new perspective on how technology can be used to improve our lives. Not just to treat illness, but to empower us to take control of our own well-being.
I'm glad to hear that.
As we wrap up, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is that you have more power over your health than you realize, and technology can be a powerful ally in your journey.
It's about becoming active participants in our health, not passive bystanders.
Right.
It's about embracing the possibilities while staying grounded in our own intuition.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the future of healthcare. It's been a truly fascinating conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, remember to stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop asking questions. The future of healthcare is in your hands.